Defection. Today we're going to be talking all about Finn, his journey in The Force Awakens, the ups and downs of his characterization, and the relationships he forges with his fellow characters, with an emphasis on Rey, Poe Dameron, and Kylo Ren. We're also going to theorize a little bit about what challenges and villains he might face in the future as he continues on the path to coming of age in the Star Wars universe. All right, so the first topic we kind of wanted to tackle was his awakening, quotation marks, and his defection from the First Order, which is kind of what starts the story. So Lauren had something to say about that. All right, so what was that, Lauren?
Well, as we all know, I don't want to kind of recap entirely what happens in the beginning of The Force Awakens, but we all know that when Finn enters the battlefield for the first time and chooses not to kill as he was commanded, Kylo Ren senses this and looks at Finn across the battlefield, but chooses not to say anything on the matter. Now, we know that Finn has clearly been trained as a Stormtrooper, so this offers a new perspective to the audience after Stormtroopers being basically treated like cannon fodder in the original trilogy. Well, this film kind of begins with a shot of Stormtroopers on the ship. You know, it's the first shot of the film, so we know that they're important, and we know that they're not just background characters. So Finn's decision and Kylo Ren's decision both have similarities in the sense that they choose to go against what they've been trained to do. And is this a coincidence, or was it meant to happen? Was it connected to the Force Awakening, or was it just pure coincidence? The First Order are definitely a group that frown upon choice and decision making, judging by their approach to training and brainwashing children from a young age. So what has happened here? Why has Finn gone against what he's been trained to do?
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's a big question that you have to answer with regards to the entire movie, because I mean, the film does kind of bring up the idea. It makes you kind of wonder, or at least it made me wonder a little bit if Finn was actually Force sensitive, and if so, to what degree? Because from what I can see, they're actually kind of establishing that there are different degrees of Force sensitivity. I think George Lucas even said that Han was a little bit Force sensitive, just not to the extent that Luke and Leia are, or any of the Jedi. So I guess you can have this affinity with the Force without necessarily being, so Force sensitive that you can move objects with your mind, let's say. So what do you think about that? Do you think Finn is Force sensitive? And if so, like, to what degree? Like, do you see him becoming a Jedi, or do you see him being more like, I don't know, like Leia, maybe?
Yeah, I see him more like Leia, personally. I think something did trigger inside him on that battlefield, and he made the choice. Despite clearly years of brainwashing. I mean, we see later on that they've had him since he was a child. They had images of him from a child. So we know that this has been a long time, and he still makes that change and decides not to do it. And I'm positive that it's something to do with the Force. I'm not sure how or why, and I think we'll probably find out in the next film. And you know, judging by the rest of the film, I don't think that he has Kylo and Rey's level of Force sensitivity. But you mentioned, we know that there's varying degrees of this in Star Wars. Different people have got different levels of Force sensitivity. So yeah, I think he's a bit like Leia, personally.
I can definitely see that. As far as Finn being or becoming a Jedi goes, I definitely don't think that he's even close to as Force sensitive as any of the the real Force sensitive characters. I think that it's possible that the Force wanted him to awaken. This was the Force's doing. I think that that's probably more or less the explanation we're going to get. But beyond that, I don't see Finn becoming a Jedi. I don't see him ever being able to like move objects with his mind. That's just the way I see it. All right, so I guess,
sorry, can I just jump in there a little bit?
Yeah.
Because,
sure.
So with Finn being Force sensitive, I definitely think there's evidence in the film, or potential evidence to suggest that he might be. There's that kind of moment where the First Order's blowing up the New Republic, and he kind of senses it. He turns around and hears those screams, even though they're obviously nowhere in normal hearing distance. And there are other things to suggest it as well throughout the film, so it's going to be interesting there. But I don't actually like the argument that he awakened morally because of his Force sensitivity or potential.
I agree.
I like the idea.
I think he was always like that.
Yeah, I like the idea that he's just making that decision because it's the right one. And I'm going to maybe talk about this a bit later, but I kind of, even though I think that he might end up being Force sensitive, I kind of like the idea that Finn might not be. And I think that thing about George Lucas saying that Han was a little Force sensitive, I'm not as far as I understand it, I don't see any evidence of that in the films themselves, so that might just be kind of a bit of a retcon. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he did say that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that, like, I don't know. It's the kind of thing. George Lucas says a lot of stuff, so it's yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't necessarily.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about, actually, Han being maybe Force sensitive, but he has such a disdain for the idea of the Force.
Yeah,
that's right. It's ironic.
Yeah,
but yeah, we shouldn't, I guess, talk about Han.
Yeah, sorry, getting distracted.
It's all good.
But I can't help but wonder what changed it though. What triggered inside him the first time he goes onto the battlefield? I mean, you mentioned it's through decency, but if he's been brainwashed all these years, it's not as clear. It may not be as clear cut as that.
Yeah, but it was
I think the problem is.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think the problem is more that Hux's brainwashing doesn't work as well as he thinks it does, and I think I think it has more to do with a flaw in that than it necessarily does Finn.
Right.
But I mean, he's obviously special. He obviously did experience this, I guess, awakening where he, looked around and realized that what he was, I mean, not necessarily what he was doing was wrong, and that he couldn't do it, and that he decided from that point on that he was not going to be affiliated with the First Order anymore. So I guess to move on to our next point, I wanted to talk about, or not me, but like one of us wanted to talk a little bit about how essentially what this story is. It's the story of three different characters converging. That is what The Force Awakens is. So you have the rogue Stormtrooper, whose story converges with this lonely scavenger, and then their two stories converge with, Kylo Ren, who is the legacy character of the story. So the first thing that we wanted to discuss a little bit was the fact that all three characters have these masks that are very representative of the kind of development that they have already undergone and that they will undergo in the future. So you wanted to say something about that?
Yeah, I mean, all three of the main characters wore masks or helmets when we first see them, and I think that's quite an interesting visual technique. Two of them, well, the difference between them though is that two of them require the masks to do their jobs. That's Rey and Finn, while Kylo chooses to wear his to cover who he truly is, because he could have done that job without the mask. They each individually take their masks off throughout the film to show who they really are. I mean, Rey and Finn first do this at the beginning of their first scenes, pretty much. Whereas Kylo takes a little bit longer to do it. I don't know whether that means anything, but it seems to me.
There's I really love the idea of the masks in general. I think that they're a very nice touch from the creators of the story. I really love the way you get to see each character, like you see them under this masked guise, and then you see them what they really look like, and you start to see that each mask it's not really who they are. So as much as you have the Stormtrooper, Finn is not the Stormtrooper. That's not all he is. Rey is not just a scavenger, and Kylo Ren is not just a creature in a mask. Yeah. And I find that very interesting. And I guess to go a little bit, to continue on that idea, we have the relationships between these characters that start to forge. And you have the relationships between, the Stormtrooper, the scavenger, and the knight, who is, Kylo Ren. And, just go on a little bit about Rey and Finn, I guess. A lot of people could say that they are the main dynamic of the story. They're the two main protagonists, one could say, and they're the ones who their journeys converge, and they go on this big adventure together, and they become really, really close to each other, and it's a great relationship. It's very nice to see. It's very refreshing to see a relationship between a young man and a young woman forged that, in my opinion, is more familial than it is completely familial, as opposed to necessarily being romantic, I guess one could say. So it's really nice to see that. And one of the things that one of my personal favorite things from that is the way Rey, she's always talking about how nobody has ever come back for her. She's been waiting forever for her family to come back, but after she gets kidnapped by Kylo, all that stuff happens. Finn does come back for her. And I think it's at that moment that they really are solidified as they have a familial relationship. And it's a really nice thing to see. I thought it was well done. I thought it was very engaging. And it was one of the highlights of the film for me. But of course, with a lot of as with a lot of stuff about this movie, a lot of people did not necessarily interpret that the same way I did. And I know that some thought that Rey and Finn would be developing a romantic relationship in the future of the story, or that perhaps even that they were already showing signs of being attracted to each other, or were playing romance, so to speak, in the film. But I guess Kirsten?
Kirsty.
Kirsten.
Yeah, so Finn,
yeah.
Obviously, as you say, people were kind of speculating about where their dynamic would go after The Force Awakens, and kind of even discussing what it was like in the film itself. And there was an interviewer at Cannes who was talking to John Boyega about them and asking, how is that romance? So it was quite a presumptuous leading question, was asking about how the romance between Finn and Rey is going to go. And he responded, Finn and Rey, they're just friends. Finn is a stormtrooper, so he doesn't really know what's going on. So the romance thing is something that's going to be interesting in the next installment. It's not going to go the way you think it's going to go. So the fact that the interviewer thought that romance would be between Finn and Rey, and he said it's not going to go the way you think it's going to go, obviously tells us that there's not going to be a romance between these two protagonists, and it's going to be something different. He doesn't say there's not going to be a romance, it's just going to be something that might be a bit more unexpected. And to echo what you were saying, Willow, about their dynamic in The Force Awakens, I definitely thought that it was more on the friends, almost like a sibling kind of dynamic.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, the way that he comes back for her after she's been saying, my family are waiting, I'm waiting for my family. And that he, he's trying to hold her hand at the beginning almost, and she's, obviously not comfortable with intimacy. She is living this loner life as a scavenger. And then when he comes back for her, she hugs him. It kind of shows that development of that she feels comfortable with him that way now. So it is quite touching to see.
I agree. It's very touching. I really, really, really love the Rey and Finn relationship. I think it's really well done. But one that I think is almost more interesting than Rey and Finn is Finn and Kylo. I think that that's something that people don't talk about nearly enough. The reason I find it really interesting is because, for one thing, Finn is yet another foil to Kylo. I mean, you have Rey as a foil to Kylo. You have Han as a foil to Kylo. There's so many characters who exist to serve as a contrast to Kylo Ren, which again, to me, just points out how important this character is going to be to the rest of the story. But Finn, for me, is one of the major ones, and I think that's really solidified in the first scene when you see the two of them looking at each other. I find I absolutely love that scene where they stare at each other, and then Finn looks so scared, and then Kylo just walks away. But
and lets the bolt go into the energy bolt.
Exactly. He jumps, and he gets like, oh my god. And Kylo's so intimidating in that moment. But of course, that starts to fade away as the story goes away, or story progresses. And the same goes for Finn. I mean, he changes a lot over the course of the story. But
it's actually quite interesting how in the beginning Kylo doesn't seem to be bothered by Finn at all. He kind of looks at him and he knows that he didn't shoot anyone for whatever reason. He doesn't say anything. But then his opinion towards Finn, gets pretty extreme by the end of the film. And
oh my god, yes.
He really wants to hurt him by the end of it. So it's quite interesting. It makes you wonder, what is it that's changed to kind of, bring that aggression?
Yeah, it's really interesting that he calls him a traitor, because that's something that you'd almost think wouldn't even apply to a lowly stormtrooper. Why would Kylo Ren care about a stormtrooper's loyalties?
Exactly.
So I mean, partly I think that line is him kind of projecting. He's obviously betrayed his family just moments before, so maybe he's just talking about himself. But it's also this idea that he underestimated Finn, that a lot of the story has gone the way it's gone because Finn made this crucial decision, and now it's something that every character is going to have to live with and respond to.
Yeah, exactly. And I find that you can really see the difference between how Kylo sees Finn from the beginning and the end, because I think that you're absolutely right that when Kylo first sees him, he's just like, oh, whatever, Stormtrooper's not listening, it's not my problem. And then he walks away, and then that's Hux's problem, who cares? And but by the end of the film, he's so angry at Finn, and he's screaming at him. He doesn't do that to Rey, he doesn't do that to Han, he doesn't do that to Hux, he doesn't do that to Snoke, he does that to Finn. And I find that I really love that moment when he screams traitor at him, because it really, I find that really got me. That's probably one of my favorite lines in the whole film. And I find it so powerful, and I think it says so much about Kylo, but it also says a lot about Finn, because I mean, it makes you wonder, like, you know, does he see himself as a traitor or whatever? I mean, I would say no, but like, it's interesting. It's interesting to look at the gray areas between the First Order and the Resistance, and how they're not really as, like, the First Order is not necessarily all wrong, just as much as the Resistance is not necessarily all right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
it will be interesting to see how they go from here with their relationship.
Oh yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing where Rey and Finn, wow, where Finn and Kylo's relationship goes from here, because I think there's a lot to say. I almost think that there's some opportunities for, like, humor in the future between them. There's some opportunities for a really interesting dynamic to be forged. One that is very different from Rey and Kylo's, and very different from Finn and Rey's, but one that I think is going to be really, really important to the trilogy nonetheless. And again, I think I've said this before, but my favorite scene in the whole movie is actually when Rey and Finn are running away from Starkiller, trying to run away from the oscillator on Starkiller base, and Kylo's lightsaber turns on, and he looks at them, and there's just this moment with the snow falling, and all three of them are staring at each other. And that was the moment when the first time I watched the movie, I saw it, and I was like, wow, I can't wait to watch this scene again 4 years from now, and look at how much these three characters have changed each other's lives, and have changed each other. And I always thought that was just a really beautiful way to look at it, I guess, for me.
No, that was a great scene.
All right. Mm-hmm. It's a beautiful scene.
Yeah, and it's a scene that really cemented Finn and Rey as co-protagonists as well. That, you know, there isn't a lead and a co-lead. They're both equally important, but perhaps for different sides of the story.
That's absolutely true, and that does lead into our next topic, I guess, which is the fact that Finn and Rey, throughout The Force Awakens, actually have solo journeys. As much as they journey together, as much as they have this relationship and form this friendship and this connection over the course of the story, they also have their own stories that they each veer off into. And I like to call those that we have the Resistance plot and we have the Force plot. So for me, the Resistance plot really starts when Poe frees Finn Finn frees Poe from the First Order, and they escape together, and whenever they crash on Jakku, all that stuff happens. But Finn and Poe forge this relationship and everything. They forge this friendship, and this is something that Rey doesn't get to see ever throughout the entire story. She never gets to see this relationship between Poe and Finn.
Yeah, she's not even introduced to Poe, is she? Actually,
no, not in the film. She never meets him in the film.
Yeah,
and to me, I find that very interesting. And much more of a distinction is even made between Finn and what I like to call the Force plot. The Force plot to me is anything to do with Rey, Kylo, Luke. We have all this, Snoke to a certain extent, but we're not really sure yet because, again, the story hasn't been told. But I imagine Snoke will also play a role in the Force plot. Whereas the Resistance plot is more or less about, the First Order is kind of like a company of war, or, it's like a war machine or whatever, and that has more to do with Finn, and then the other one has more to do with Rey. But, the distinction between the Force plot and the Resistance plot, you can really see that Rey, as she goes through her journey in The Force Awakens, she does a lot of things without Finn that he doesn't even see. So that's how much that they're making a distinction between these two stories. You have, on one side of the story, you have, Finn forging these relationships with characters in the Resistance, and how you have his whole journey from becoming a Resistance fighter or whatever. And on the other side, you have Rey's journey, where she gets kidnapped by Kylo, she gets called by the lightsaber, she gets dragged into this huge adventure or whatever, where she gets brought to Starkiller Base, and Finn really never gets to see any of these great moments. He doesn't even find out that Rey is Force sensitive, as far as we know in the story, which is huge.
True.
I mean, that's we never get to see his reaction to it. Yeah,
he doesn't even see her use the lightsaber, does he?
No, he never sees her use the lightsaber. He doesn't even know that she saved him as of right now. Yeah, and that's what I mean by a huge distinction between the two stories. And I think that you can really, really, really see where the two stories are going from there. Because if they're making such a distinction already, I find it hard to believe that distinction is not going to be followed through to an even greater extent in the next film.
Yeah, I agree. like saying that they're both protagonists, it means that they're both going to have their own shadows to confront, not to get too Jungian about it, but they're both going to have their own challenges and key relationships that they form with other characters that are really going to define their journey. And if we kind of pay attention to some of the spoilers, spoiler alert, everyone, for 8 that are coming out, it's, you know, things like seeing Daisy Ridley arrive in Ireland for filming with Adam Driver and Mark Hamill really suggests that she's going to be spending time on Act 2, kind of in the Force plot, as you call it. And Finn is going to be with Poe and this new character played by Kelly Marie Tran in the Resistance side of things, and presumably working against the First Order. And if you look at what's kind of set up as his real challenge in The Force Awakens, it's that he's running away from the First Order and then finds out that he can't run from his problems, he has to face them. And in The Force Awakens, that kind of manifests with him dueling with Kylo and losing, and before being rescued with Rey. But that can't be the end of the story for him. There has to be something bigger. So it's going to be interesting to see how they do that, and that it does look like, so far, we don't have any spoilers about Finn and Rey sharing scenes. And obviously it's early days, we've still got a year and a half to go. But it does suggest that they're not going to be spending an awful lot of time together.
Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense, considering what TFA was even about. And I know I talked about this in the other podcasts that I did. When I analyze a character, when I start to look at a story, whenever, I really like to look at, you know, why they were created and what role they're meant to fill in the story. So like when I look at Finn, I really see, you know, I see the co-lead, I see the secondary lead of the story, and to me that doesn't immediately scream sidekick. That doesn't tell me, you know, he's going to be a character who's going to follow around the hero like a puppy for 2 more films. It doesn't tell me that we're going to see 2 more stories that are exactly like The Force Awakens with Rey and Finn on their adventure and, like, you know, getting to know each other. Because I know as much as so many people love that part of The Force Awakens, as much as I love that part of The Force Awakens, that story has been told. It has been told. It exists in The Force Awakens. And I can't see why they would want to tell that story again. That's just not the way writing tends to work. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that just means that we're going to be getting something different. And isn't that what everybody wants? Isn't that what we all want? A story that is, you know, self-contained, well-written, and has a clear beginning, middle, and end that are each unique in their own way and each tell a different story, but also a story as a whole.
Yeah, exactly. And if we think about the Star Wars and the sequel trilogy as a coming of age, The Force Awakens obviously starts when the characters are quite young and perceived as innocent, at least the heroes. So Finn and Rey meeting on Jakku and running around and learning to fly the Millennium Falcon together and celebrating their triumphs, it kind of has this childlike innocence about it, and it's really charming.
Absolutely.
And it's wonderful the way it's portrayed. But then, because it's the first part, it's okay, how are they going to grow now? And it probably means that they can't grow in the same way together as they would apart, that they're going to, and that they'll come back together at some point and be changed and notice that change in each other and themselves.
And I think that Finn and Rey's parting absolutely suggests that, with there's just something almost ominous about the way she like kisses his forehead and she tells him, "I'll see you again." And you get this feeling that they're not going to see each other again for a long time, or if they do, when they do meet each other again, they're going to be very different. And they're going to have gone through a lot of experiences without each other that are going to have changed each other or changed themselves as individuals. And I think that we're going to maybe see, I'm not necessarily wondering if there's going to be a conflict, like any kind of conflict between them in the future because of that, but I actually wonder if there will be, because, well, I guess we'll see.
There is a possibility, isn't there?
Yeah, we can't know what's going to happen, but you'd think that almost their relationship right now has been running almost a bit too smoothly, and that you would need to inject some kind of drama in there at some point.
And I personally can definitely see that drama involving Kylo Ren. And again, going back to that idea of these 3 characters interacting with each other and kind of locking together like a set of gears, and how we're going to see them have their individual like problems and see them all develop, I guess, all spinning together. All right. The next thing we wanted to discuss was Finn, Hux Phasma, and the Stormtrooper program. All right, so you have something to say about that, Kirsten?
Yeah, so we know from the junior novel Servants of the Empire that Hux's father, Brendel, established the Stormtrooper program, and he got this idea from the Jedi taking younglings at birth and training them away from their families, which I think is really interesting. The First Order taking that from the Jedi, suggesting that they weren't making the best of decisions in the first place. So Hux Jr. has obviously followed in his father's footsteps, and we kind of get that funny interplay between Kylo and Hux suggesting, oh, perhaps Snoke should be using a clone army, and it's obviously a dig at Hux and his father's decisions with the Stormtrooper program and its effectiveness. So that, to me, makes Hux, or at least the Stormtrooper program in general, maybe Phasma's part of that, Finn's primary antagonist. And even though we don't see them directly facing off in The Force Awakens, I think it's leading up to that, because the Stormtrooper program is Finn's shadow. It's something that he's trying to run away from. He doesn't want to acknowledge it as part of his history. He's saying, that's not who I am, that's not what I do. But if you actually look at his behaviour in the movie, and it's a war film, but he kind of switches onto the side of the resistance, but then is still shooting, still fighting in that way that arguably could be seen as Stormtrooper behaviour. It's interesting to think about. Will Finn's journey be about liberating other Stormtroopers from Hux and Phasma's control? What's going to be his end goal here? Because we know that he's going to be part of the resistance, but what is that going to mean specifically?
Yeah, I believe
absolutely
it will encompass that. Because he did come across a bit trigger happy when it came to shooting his previous colleagues, and maybe Force Awakens, they didn't want to kind of cover that because that might be a future storyline, that he may have some guilt about killing Stormtroopers and may actually want to help them, and may actually realise that they're in the same situation he was in, and they may well be innocent people too, So yeah, it's I don't know, it's a possibility. I think it would give Finn his own storyline away from Rey and out of Rey's shadow, and doing something himself for other people.
And I think it's a very powerful storyline as well. I just almost get shivers thinking about Finn liberating the Stormtroopers, and just thinking about the idea of Stormtroopers being liberated in general, because as we discussed at the beginning of this podcast, they've been nothing but, cannon fodder throughout the entire series. They're those guys who can't shoot properly. But the stakes have gone so much higher with the introduction of this idea that Stormtroopers, they're no longer clones. They're no longer just a person who's been used science, whatever, to clone them over and over. So it's just like killing the same person again and again. It's not like that anymore. It's not like people who've signed up to become warriors for the Empire. It's not like that. They are people who were stolen as children, and who were basically brainwashed, or very realistically brainwashed, to kill people and to act as soldiers. And that's very twisted. It's very dark. It does bring this idea to light, where you wonder, if Finn was able to awaken, maybe other people will be able to awaken, or maybe Finn will be able to influence other people awakening. Maybe there's some kind of turn off the Stormtrooper control button at the First Order. Finn has to go, maybe not quite that literally, but Finn has to go on an adventure to set them all free. And I keep imagining this scene where he's walking at the front of them and they're all behind him, and then they turn against the First Order, and I think that would be amazing to see that. Personally,
definitely.
But
it's quite poetic, really, isn't it? Thinking about this one Stormtrooper making a difference.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's beautiful.
It's like
it definitely takes them out of Rey's shadow.
Yeah, and it almost makes me think of Harriet Tubman or something. It does give me that feeling, and it makes me wonder if there's a metaphor there that J.J. Abrams wanted to play on. But I guess we'll see in the future.
Yeah.
All right, so the next thing we wanted to discuss was Finn and Poe. So going back to the Resistance, and how we talked about before, how there was Finn and Poe kind of forge this relationship that Rey never really finds out about, how they become friends, whatever, kind of like a bromance brother figure. But a lot of people actually interpreted Poe's interactions with Finn as him having kind of like a crush on him, if you want to call it that. And people have been kind of wondering if there's any possible way this could possibly become a kind of like a romantic thing in the future, if they could be their own kind of, I mean, people have wondered, and this has definitely been bolstered by the media to a great extent, by various websites such as BuzzFeed, and by MTV nominating Stormtrooper for Ship of the Year, and
That's the
validation.
Oh wow, I feel old.
Absolutely.
And didn't sorry, I've forgotten his name. The guy who plays Poe, his name's gone completely out of my mind. But he said himself, didn't he say on Ellen that he was playing it like that? And I know it was a joke. It was probably a joke, but still, people would take that seriously.
Yeah, I think he's got a really good sense of humour. He's almost joking in every interview that he gives.
Yeah.
But there are elements of it you can see. I mean, maybe Poe is just a flirty guy, but things like everyone's been analysing the lip bite and the fact that he tells Finn to keep the jacket and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it makes you wonder.
Lip bite. Sorry,
I mean, you keep picturing the lip bite.
Yeah. Well, it could be taken a couple of different ways, couldn't it? Really, I mean, it could be nothing, or it could be something. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, it could be something that they just leave ambiguous. It's like this interesting dynamic that's going on. But
I think that is the much more likely outcome, because there have been a lot of rumors that, and a lot of logic in the idea that Kelly Marie Tran might be playing a love interest for Finn, which is, again, one of those things, big we'll see sign. But I think that makes sense, and we're going to discuss that a little later. But as for Poe and Finn actually ever being something romantic, I think that it has been bolstered by the media, and I think that there might be some fallout from this in the future. I'm going to say when it doesn't happen, and I think a lot of people are going to be disappointed, but hopefully everybody will be able to move past it. And
yeah, I don't think they're going to have a relationship in that way personally. But
no.
You never know. They might make Poe gay or him as gay. Which
I can see them doing that.
Yeah,
why not?
But yeah, like you say, judging by the filming leaks that have come out lately, I don't think they will have a relationship.
Yeah,
and just based on the fact that it's another one of those things where it was just, I think that JJ just okayed Oscar to play that kind of character, and just because it's cute, it's funny, like it's original, and it's something that we don't see all the time, and I think it works really well.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, it's just great to have that represented in the Star Wars universe, because they have LGBT characters in the books, but I think it's a first for the film, even if it is a bit ambiguous. So it's great to see anyway.
And I do think that they could definitely leave it ambiguous, and that it's going to be the kind of thing where interpret it the way you want, I guess.
Yeah.
Or it could be like Dumbledore, I guess, and we could get kind of an announcement. But I don't see that happening.
Well, we never know. Poe could
we'll
have another love interest at some point. We don't know. So.
You never know.
We don't know. Who knows? All right. So the next thing we wanted to discuss was character development, which is one of my favorite topics. So Finn, he really is, throughout the story, he goes from this man who wants to run, as that's exactly what Maz Kanata says to him. He goes from that character who wants to constantly run away from everything. He ran away from the First Order. Even John Boyega, that's what he had to say. Finn's always running.
Must be tiring.
And it's true. You can tell it is tiring. He sweats a lot in the movie. But he goes from this character who always wants to run away. I'm not going to call him a coward, but yeah, he always wants to run because for understandable reasons. I mean, he's getting shot at. He's getting chased by these.
Yeah, I think I'd want to run too.
I would definitely. I would bury myself in the sand. But yeah, he goes from that to a hero. He totally saves. Well, he tries to save Rey. He doesn't save Rey. Rey ends up saving him. But he does get her out of the oscillator, which is success. I mean, no, actually, Rey saved herself there too. But Rey always saves herself. That's just the way it is. So he tried. He gets that big gold star "You tried" button. So I'm wondering, is Finn supposed to be kind of the new Han Solo, as opposed to being the main character? Is he supposed to be like that secondary lead character?
Yeah, I mean, I'm wary of kind of pairing up the new characters with the old ones, because I feel like it was tempting for people to do that because TFA or the Force Awakens, so
exactly.
it kind of did seem very similar to A New Hope, so people are probably tempted to do that. But obviously they're their own characters. They're not going to be exact replicas because that would be boring and we'd know where everything was going. But I do think that Finn has more in common with Han Solo than Luke, just kind of from this first session we have, because just looking at his motives and how they change over the film, like you say, he's always running. At first, he really is just motivated by fear. And while that's understandable, it's something that can be considered quite selfish or self-centered at least. He doesn't see himself as part of the resistance or part of any larger cause. He tries to get Rey to leave the conflict and go with him to the Outer Rim because he just wants to be safe, and he's made this new friend and thinks that could be a path to happiness or whatever he considers, his future. Now he has one. Mm-hmm. So he's initially motivated by that, but then over the course of the film, we watch him kind of take up the hero's call and decide that there's something worth fighting for here, even if it's on the other side of what he saw. So you do see him evolve, and it's interesting to see how his strong attachment to Rey motivates that, and whether that's going to be what is continuing his motivation, or whether when he wakes up from his coma, he's kind of pulled into the resistance plot a bit more. That he wakes up. I
hear soap opera whenever I hear that.
I know, it is quite soap opera, isn't it? And people have even been speculating as to whether he's going to have a bit of amnesia or something like that. And I'm like, oh God, please no.
And revert back to the Stormtrooper mindset or something.
Actually, well, that would be interesting, I suppose.
That would be cool.
But yeah, is he going to wake up and then he'll see Poe again and just kind of be, okay, you're now the big deal in the resistance. It's almost like he kept saying that he was the big deal to kind of cover his tracks to Rey and Han, but now he is the big deal.
Yeah.
He helped blow up Starkiller Base, so it's going to be interesting to see how he fits into that now. Yeah,
and I really like how you almost have the idea that the jacket that he takes from the burning TIE fighter, the Poe's jacket, he puts it on, and after that he kind of starts lying. He starts saying, I'm a big deal. I'm a resistance fighter. That's me. I'm for the resistance. But he's really not, and he's obviously lying. I'm not sure why he does that or whatever. He does it a few times throughout the movie. He lies actually quite frequently, but most of it is fairly harmless and doesn't actually hurt anybody. So it's mostly just there for for comic effect. And he puts the jacket on, and then throughout the film he's pretending to be the hero, but then he really becomes the hero when he goes to save Rey, and I really like that idea. I think it's really well done in the film. So and other than that, I just mentioned that Finn is kind of the comic relief of the film, and that's very, very true in comparison to all the other characters. You have Rey, who's really the hero, and any comic relief that comes from Rey mostly has to do with her hitting Finn with a stick, or her using some kind of epic Jedi power to get out of a situation that she shouldn't necessarily be able to get out of, and which is mostly just adorable. And you have Rey, that's Rey. And other than that, I mean, Han has a little bit, but I would say that Finn has the most comic relief of any character in the story. I mean, does anyone want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, he had a lot of comedic situations, like in particular the water scene in Jakku, but I don't believe he's a Jar Jar. I know a lot of people have compared him to Jar Jar Binks.
No way.
He's not.
Yeah, he has his own heroic moments too, like you mentioned. I mean, he saved Poe, he went to Starkiller Base to help Rey, and he raised a lightsaber against Kylo Ren. I mean, who's absolutely terrifying. None of those things are particularly clever moves, and he wasn't completely successful in all of them. But I think the courage it took to do those things in the first place says a lot to me. I mean, just to compare it to the other films, there's lots of films where heroes can also be comedic. I mean, you've got things like Princess Bride, where all the heroes are quite funny in that. And then you've got things like Lord of the Rings, with Merry and Pippin and Legolas and Gimli. And no one can deny that those... Exactly. Yeah. No one can deny that they're not heroes, just as much as Frodo and Sam are. I mean, even Sam has his funny moments. So I see like a Sam or a Merry and Pippin or Legolas kind of character in his own right. He may not be the hero like Rey is,
but he's a hero.
Exactly, yeah.
And I very much agree about that. I agree that it's kind of ridiculous that he's been compared to Jar Jar because, like, if you think about it, Han Solo is also the character who had probably the most comic relief in at least A New Hope. He certainly had more than Luke did. I mean, Han is still that character. He's so like cool and so serious that he's very funny, and he does have that banter with Leia, but nobody calls him Jar Jar. Like,
exactly.
I don't know. I think that there's a double standard. I don't think it's fair. I know a lot of people have a problem with Finn. They don't like Finn for a whole bunch of reasons, and that's maybe something we'll get into in a minute. But yeah, I mean, I think that Finn's a great character. I think that all the new characters are really meant to be. They're new characters. They're not. Rey is not Luke, and Finn is not Han, and they are new characters for a new generation. That's exactly what all the new characters are. Kylo is not Darth Vader. He is Kylo Ren. He's the new character. And his journey is going to be original and different, just as much as Rey's is, just as much as Finn's is. They're just because certain things happened in the past, it doesn't mean that they're going to happen again. Just because, the writers are so unoriginal that they're just going to take the outline for the OT and just, all right, change the names, and we're done. No.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you both that Finn has a lot of the comic relief moments, but as you say, a lot of the other characters do. I know I was laughing when Kylo Ren was having his temper tantrums and the Stormtroopers were kind of course. Walking backwards to get the hell away from him.
Darth Vader never had comic relief.
Exactly.
Oh, no.
And the reality is this is a film that's for families. People of all ages watch it, people from all backgrounds, and you have to have those lighter moments. Star Wars isn't supposed to be all that gritty, it's not Game of Thrones.
Really not.
So you want to make people laugh as well as cry and cheer and all of these different emotions. So he definitely provides a lot of those moments in The Force Awakens, but it's going to be interesting to see how he evolves going forward and whether it will still be him having that lighter plot line or if they'll bring in a new character to do something like that and he'll be taken a bit more seriously. Who knows?
I'm wondering that as well.
Yeah.
All right, so just to get along here, the next thing we're going to discuss is the marketing for The Force Awakens. So a lot of people, based on the marketing, thought that Finn was going to be the main character. They thought he was going to be the Jedi. But of course, when you actually watch the film, it's revealed eventually, quite quickly actually, that Rey is actually the protagonist. That she is the Force sensitive. That she's the one who gets the call of the legacy lightsaber. That she is the one who defeats Kylo Ren at the end. She is the heroine of the story. She is the main protagonist. And a lot of people, from what I've seen from comments on the internet, various places, that a lot of people still think that Finn is the protagonist. They think he's the main character. And I wonder if that has something to do with what people like to call, the red herrings in the marketing for TFA, including interviews, various, the trailer, various marketing images, things like that positioned Finn with the lightsaber that made him, when they in the trailer it says the Jedi as Finn is holding the lightsaber, and I mean it makes sense for them to kind of have that red herring because throughout the film, and it's not until the end, as you say, that Rey picks up the lightsaber, so it is almost like it's understandable why they did that because they didn't want to spoil that surprise. It's true. It's a story. I mean, you have to have that. You have to have that sense of surprise there.
Yeah, but it does maybe lead some people to wonder if Finn's going to join Rey on Act 2 training to be a Jedi because they saw him with the lightsaber and think that that's maybe his destiny too.
Especially a lot of people who just watch the film once, maybe they immediately think that Finn was Finn's the main character. He's going to be a Jedi as well. But I just can't see them doing that. I can't see them rehashing Rey's story, a movie behind her.
Well, I don't think that would
make any sense.
That wouldn't do justice to Finn's character anyway, would it?
No, definitely
I agree.
not.
He has to have his own story, and the Resistance plot is just as important. It's a film about war. You have to have that politics
right now,
angle.
it's more important.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, to me, judging Finn's fighting skills with the lightsaber, he has a couple of fights not only with Kylo but also with that Stormtrooper, and he's not very successful. Not in the sense that Rey is, bless him. So, yeah, that kind of implies that he's not destined for the lightsaber.
Yeah, it's interesting
anyway.
that if you look at the marketing, the trailers that were coming out, it was always Rey positioned with the blaster and Finn with the saber. But now it's
Rey had the staff.
Oh yes, the staff as well. Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
But then the blaster as well that Han gave her, and then I was at Star Wars Celebration a couple of weeks ago, and it's completely reversed now. Rey's always with the saber, and he's with the blaster. So
it's interesting. My doll, I've got a Rey doll. I'm sad, I know. And that has the blaster and her staff. I don't think it has the lightsaber now. I'm thinking about it. I'll have to have a look. Maybe it does have a lightsaber as well. Maybe it has all three.
Wow.
Now that I'm thinking about it, it might have all three. But I think I got that after the film came out. So, yeah. I think before the film came out, they definitely didn't have that around. It was just, she just had a stick.
Yeah.
It does speak volumes about, well, it also speaks volumes about the staff in general, but that's a discussion for another podcast.
Yeah.
It just make you wonder if the staff is more important than it seems to be.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So next of all, we're going to talk about, I guess, the how people took the character and how people took what have been labeled inconsistencies in Finn's characterization. The biggest of which would be the difference between how he treats the stormtroopers. So you have this character who, he's a stormtrooper, he awakens, he sees that he's been controlled or whatever, and then next two scenes later he's shooting up the stormtroopers, and it's just to me, I would say that is inconsistent.
Yeah, they kind of glossed over it.
The reason they very much glossed over it. Like, the reason Finn awakens is because he's holding his dying friend or companion, fellow stormtrooper, fellow warrior, whatever, in his arms, and he puts that handprint on his helmet, and he awakens.
Mm-hmm.
But and then 2 scenes later, he's shooting the stormtroopers, and I found that, for me, that was the part of the movie that always kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. Throughout every time I watched it, even the first time I watched it, I thought, wow, that's a little strange. But, I mean, of course, the argument could be made, he was trying to get himself out of the situation. He was trying to run away, which is exactly what Finn does, as John Boyega has said many times. But, I mean, it is very much glossed over in the film, and I hope that is something that they tackle in the future, because as much as it's just something very, it's hard to watch. It's very, it's not done well, in my opinion, and it does cause people to criticize Finn a lot more than they would have had he shown just a little bit of, care for, okay, Poe, don't shoot them, don't do that, just fly away, something like that. But,
yeah.
I don't know if you guys have looked at the Art of the Force Awakens book, but it shows that not necessarily Finn, but the characters that they were kind of playing around that would be in Finn's role in the story, they were playing with lots of different identities. I think at one point they were thinking about him being a pirate, which obviously went more into Maz's role, but it was almost like for a long time they couldn't really decide who this second protagonist was going to be, and then once they decided that he was, once he decided, okay, we're going to make him a stormtrooper, maybe that didn't quite translate to, well, how are they going to have him deal with that moral dilemma? And maybe they'll do that in the second film. I know Rian Johnson is very interested in issues of moral ambiguity and things like that, so that could be part of his challenge as a hero.
Yeah, another thing that I hear people saying is the fact that Finn lies a lot, the fact that they call him a coward, all this stuff. I don't think that that's true. I think that the lying is mainly just there because it's funny. It's not there that we're supposed to sit down and look at it, oh my god, he lied to Rey, he's such a jerk. No way. That's not what it's there for.
Han Solo is way more of a jerk, but everyone loves him.
He is!
Exactly.
And everyone loves the fact that he's a jerk. Whereas Finn, it's like, oh my god, you're a liar. How could you do that?
Oh, come on.
Yeah, but the one that
thing.
again, exactly. It's another one that I find funny, the way he the scene where it's like, that's not how the Force works. The one after Han Solo kind of calls him out, oh my god, you brought me here and we have no plan. Nice going. That's another one. He's just we're here to save Rey. Hello, but and they.
Yeah, it turns out not to matter, right? That's the crucial bit, that they end up saving everything anyway. So
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's really just there to be funny.
Yeah.
With the whole lying thing to Rey doesn't even seem that bothered that he's lying to her anyway. So I don't know why. Yeah, I just don't know why everyone seems to be so hard on him for that.
The sad thing about Rey's upbringing and her experience on Jakku is probably she expects people to lie to her. She probably doesn't have any trust in anyone. So it's almost like, did she really feel let down by it, or was it almost like she expected it, and then he earned her trust through by coming back for her later by kind of changing his tune, so that kind of you know, she's, like you say, she's really not that upset in the moment, but maybe he earns that respect from her over time.
Yeah. No, I completely agree.
All right. Yeah, I agree as well. So I guess the last part as far as his characterization goes is some people call him a stormtrooper in name only, but I guess yeah, we've already kind of discussed that. We went into it because it was connected to another topic, but again, that's just the idea that his characterization is a little bit inconsistent, and we hope to see this amended in the future. And I would very much, I want to see Finn become an interesting, like very interesting character who has a great journey all his own. All right, so I guess we're getting into the conclusion, which is going to be all about the future of Finn. We're going to have to try to get through this kind of quickly because we're running a little bit long. Kelly Marie Tran has been cast as a character. We don't know who she is yet, but there have been a lot of suggestions that she's going to be a character who is important to Finn and his journey throughout the rest of the story. John Boyega has been, I think he's been in at least 3 different interviews now where he has commented on her importance, on the fact that she's making a big leap forward for Asian actresses in Hollywood, that she's playing a lead character. That was his exact word. She's playing a new lead in the story, and he also said that she is fully in the movie. So to me, that does not sound like he's talking about a character with a couple scenes or a cute alien or something. I think that she's going to be playing an actual character who has a big role in the story and a big role in the rest of Finn's character development, and I think that she's going to play some kind of role in his story. So do you guys agree about that? Or
well,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'll believe John when he says these kind of things.
Yeah.
And it's not just him either. Rian Johnson, I was at the Future Filmmakers panel at Star Wars Celebration, and after John came on stage, Rian started talking about Kelly, which suggests that their stories will be connected, that she'll be coming in and her core dynamic will be with Finn.
And there were even some pictures going around at Star Wars Celebration where she was spotted there, and it almost looked like they were considering letting her on stage, but then they decided against it. And she was seen photographed wearing a T-shirt with Finn on it, which is kind of just like a cute little touch. Makes you wonder if they told her to wear that,
I think that's adorable.
She just decided to by herself. It is adorable. She's a very pretty girl, and I think that she's going to be great in the role.
Yeah. Definitely. I mean, going back to the Dubrovnik set, I found it quite interesting at the time that they let those pictures slip, the cracks, and it does make you wonder, because they've been so careful with all the rest of the filming. I mean, this one piece of filming, maybe it was the city itself, maybe it was easy for people to get access, I don't know. But it's quite interesting that those photos were released. But not released, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. But it feels like they almost just left the horse to get taken pictures out in the open, and not just out in the open with the 2 stunt doubles on the horse.
Yeah,
it makes you wonder if they were trying to get people to see. All right, so these 2 characters are going to be doing their thing, and then later, I guess a month or 2 later, Adam, Luke, and Daisy were all photographed coming in Ireland together. So there's that. It's almost like they were making, I guess, a press distinction between the two stories, between the Force plot and the Resistance plot.
Yeah, that's how it feels.
I think Rian Johnson has said that there's not going to be as many secrets with the filming and the spoilers coming out as there were with the first one, which does make sense. You know, it was the first Star Wars movie in 10 years. They obviously wanted to keep the hype. And that's JJ too. Yeah, exactly. He's all about the mystery box. Whereas Ryan's probably going to do something that hinges more on the characters developing in a more intense and realistic way. So he's not so concerned about these big plot points. It's more about what's actually going to be in the film itself. And
I hope that means less red herrings as well.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. I think it's almost like they have to pull in the red herrings that were kind of getting out of control from the first film.
Yeah.
It's almost a form of damage control with kind of, JJ saying Rey's parents weren't in The Force Awakens, that sort of thing. And they're trying to set the story straight almost with making it very clear that John is going to be spending a core amount of time filming scenes with Kelly, not necessarily with Daisy.
And I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think that I think it's a good idea to start to kind of rein in this stuff. Even now, I mean, considering how early we are in production, I mean, it's very interesting that they are trying so hard to kind of get people in the mindset that all right, Finn and Kelly Marie Tran are going to have scenes together. I've never seen this done. I didn't see this done with, at least from what I've heard, with any of the characters from before The Force Awakens came out, which does go along with the secrecy idea, but it also makes you wonder if they are trying to emphasize the importance of that KMT or Kelly Marie Tran is going to have to with Finn.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've had absolutely nothing about Benicio del Toro and sorry, what's her name? The other actress who's from
Laura
yeah, that's it.
Laura.
Yeah, we haven't had much about them at all. Whereas we know that she's going to be working with Finn. Her character's main character. So yeah, there's a little bit more. We know a little bit more about her.
Mm-hmm. And I think that it does make sense that she might be playing a love interest. But yeah, that's something that we're all going to have to wait and see. Another one of those we'll see things.
Yeah, I mean, in the context of John's Variety interview that we quoted earlier, if he's not talking about Stormpilot, then this dynamic that he has with Kelly Marie Tran's character might be something that is, going to go that way, and it wouldn't be the way that the interviewer would expect, because she's a brand new character. We don't know anything about her yet.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think that's exactly what he was implying with that interview.
Yeah.
Because I think he was talking specifically about Finn, because that's the idea. That's the sense that I got, was that in the interview he was talking about Finn and his romantic future, and how it would not go the way the interviewer thought, i.e. not Rey and Finn, but Finn as somebody else. All right, so I guess we've gone through pretty much everything. Unless, are there any other final points anybody wants to kind of discuss, or are we pretty much done for this one?
I think we're done. The only other thing that I noticed was on Instagram, John posted a picture of him working out, and he said, Finn isn't going to mess around in the next film. He's going to be taken a bit more seriously. So it kind of makes you wonder that he's almost conscious of the fact that he's been considered the comic relief for not quite a protagonist. That's a very sad idea. Yeah.
Yeah, that's too bad.
So if he's...
Because I think John's a great actor, and I think that Finn's a great character.
Me too.
And I know there's a lot of, I've seen some negativity about the character, but I really think I enjoyed him. I thought he was a big piece of The Force Awakens. I thought he was a big part of the heart of the story, and I think that the movie would not have been the same without him. And I'm not one of those people who skips their scenes when I watch the movie, because it's part of the story for me. It's part of the evolution of the narrative that we're going to see in the future.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah. I mean, I think Finn and Kylo Ren have both got a lot of criticism, obviously for very different reasons.
Yeah, for different
even Rey has had criticism as well for being a so-called Mary Sue.
Oh, well, that's not even about the character. That's obviously saying a lot more about the people complaining themselves than her double standards there.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I guess that's pretty much it. I guess have a great day, everyone. We hope you enjoyed this podcast. This is, I guess, Willow, Lauren, and Kirsty. All right, see you guys next time.
See you soon.
Bye.